envelope sat on Dorothy Mitchell's kitchen table like a grenade with the pin already pulled. It had arrived 3 days ago, forwarded from her son's law office in Atlanta. And for 3 days, Dorothy had circled it like a wounded animal, afraid to touch it, afraid to open it, afraid to face whatever truth it contained. The return address was from a medical laboratory in Savannah. The kind of plain, bureaucratic label that could contain anything from routine test results to a death sentence. Dorothy was 71 years old, and she had learned that plain envelopes rarely brought good news. She sat down, finally, on this gray November morning, her arthritis making her movements stiff and deliberate. The house around her was quiet, too quiet, the way it had been for the past 15 years since Bernard had died. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked with metronomic precision, each second falling like a stone into a well. Dorothy picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. The paper was good quality, heavy stock that resisted tearing. She used a knife to slit it open cleanly, the way Bernard had taught her. Always be deliberate. Never rush important things. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a laboratory letterhead and rows of numbers and abbreviations that meant nothing to her. But at the bottom, circled in red pen by someone with a steady hand, were 4 words that stopped her heart. Pregnancy confirmed. 16 weeks. Dorothy stared at those words until they blurred. Then she laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound that startled even her. This had to be a mistake. A clerical error. Someone had mixed up her file with a teenage girl's, with a young woman's, with anyone's file but hers. She was 71 years old. She hadn't had a menstrual cycle in 2 decades. The very idea was absurd, impossible, obscene. But then she thought about the nausea, the exhaustion that had pinned her to the bed for weeks, the strange, fluttering sensation low in her abdomen that she'd attributed to indigestion, or perhaps the beginning of some terminal illness. And she thought about James Calloway, the man who'd appeared in her life like an unexpected summer storm, beautiful and dangerous, and completely inappropriate. Dorothy stood up, the letter falling from her hands to the table. She walked to the bathroom on legs that didn't feel like her own. She stood in front of the mirror and lifted her blouse, looking at her reflection with new eyes. Her body had changed, she realized. Her breasts, which had softened and deflated after menopause, were tender and fuller. Her stomach, always flat despite her age, now curved outward slightly. She thought it was just the weight gain that came with sitting around feeling sick. But now, with this knowledge, the curve looked different. It looked purposeful. It looked like life. Dorothy sat down on the closed toilet lid and put her face in her hands.
Let me tell you a story.
She was pregnant
about a magical place where
at
dreams
71
come
years
alive.
old with a child that shouldn't exist.
About a magical
Couldn't
place
exist,
where dreams come
yet
alive.
apparently did.
Let me tell you a story.
And the father
about
was a
magical
man
place
43
where dreams
years her
come
junior.
alive.
A man
Let me
her
tell you a
children
story
didn't even
about
know
a magical
existed.
place where
A
dreams come
man
alive.
the entire town
Let me
of
tell you a
Magnolia
story
Springs,
about a magical place
Alabama,
where dreams
would
come
crucify
alive.
her for loving. To
Let me tell you a
understand
story
how Dorothy
from when I
Mitchell
was young.
had arrived at this impossible moment,
Let me tell you a
one
story
had
from
to
when
go
I
back
was young.
18 months to the day the
Let
water
me tell you
heater
a
in her
story from
basement
when I was young.
had decided to surrender. After 40
Let me
years
tell you
of
a story
faithful
from when
service,
I was young.
Dorothy had discovered the flood on a Tuesday morning when she'd gone down to retrieve her Christmas decorations. The basement was ankle deep in water, and her boxes of ornaments, collected over 50 years of marriage, were soaking, disintegrating, memories
Let me tell
dissolving
you a story
into pulp.
from when I was young.
She'd called every plumber in the county.
Let
It
me
was
tell you
summer,
a story from
peak
when I was
season
young.
for air conditioning failures and burst pipes,
Let me tell you a story
and no
from
one
when I
could
was
come
young.
for at least a week. Then Mrs.
Let
Patterson
me tell
from the
you a
church
story from when I
had
was young.
mentioned her nephew, James, who just moved to
Let me
town
tell you a story
and was
from when I
doing
was young.
handyman work. He's very good with his hands, Mrs. Patterson had said, with the innocent enthusiasm of someone who couldn't see the landmine she was laying. He's staying in my garage apartment while he gets on his feet. Lost his wife 2 years ago. Poor thing. Still grieving.
Let me tell you a story from
James
long ago.
Calloway had
It was a
arrived
time
that
of wonder and
afternoon
mystery.
driving a pickup truck
Let me tell you a
that
story
had
from
seen
long
better
ago.
days.
It was a time of wonder and
Dorothy
mystery.
had watched from the
Let me
kitchen
tell
window
you a story from
as he
long ago.
parked in her driveway.
It was a time of wonder and
and her
mystery.
first thought
Let
had
me
been
tell
how
you a
young
story
he
from
looked.
long ago.
28.
It was a
Mrs.
time of
Patterson
wonder
had
and
said,
mystery.
though Dorothy
me tell
thought
you a
he might
story
have
from
been
long
even
ago.
younger than that.
It was a time of wonder and
He
mystery.
was tall and lean, with the kind of easy athletic grace that comes from a lifetime of physical work. His hair was dark and fell across his forehead in a way that made him look perpetually windswept. When he'd knocked on her door, his smile had been genuine and a little sad. The smile of someone who'd learned to put on a good face despite carrying weight
It was a quiet morning,
no
just
one
like
could
this
see.
one's.
The water heater
remember the
repair
feeling right
had
here.
taken 3 days.
It was a quiet morning,
The old
just like
unit
this one's.
was beyond
I
salvation,
remember the feeling right here.
and James had to
It was a
install
quiet morning, just
a
like this
completely
one's.
new system.
I remember the feeling right here.
Dorothy had made it her
It was
habit
a quiet morning,
to bring
just
him
like
lunch.
this one's.
It was
I
only
remember the
polite,
feeling right here.
and the boy looked
It
like
was a quiet
he
morning,
wasn't
just
eating
like this one's.
properly. They
I remember the
talked while
feeling
he ate,
right here.
sitting on her back porch
It was a
in
moment
the shade of the
I'll never
magnolia
forget.
tree that gave the town its name.
It was a quiet morning, just like
James
this one's.
spoke about his
I
late
remember
wife,
the feeling right
Rebecca, who
It was a
died
quiet
in a
morning,
car
just like this
accident
one's.
on a rainy
I remember
highway.
the feeling right
He
here.
spoke about how he'd left Georgia
It was a quiet morning, just like
because
this one's.
everything
I
there
remember the
reminded
feeling
him of her.
right here.
He spoke
It was a
about
quiet
feeling
morning, just
untethered,
like this one's.
like
I
a
remember
boat
the
with
feeling
its
right
anchor
here.
cut loose, drifting without direction. Dorothy had recognized that feeling. She'd lived it for 15 years after Bernard's death. She told James about her husband, about the pneumonia that had taken him so suddenly, about the terrible stillness of a house that had once been filled with children
Let me tell you
and
a
laughter,
story about a magical
and now
place where
echoed
dreams come
with
alive.
only her footsteps.
Let me
They
tell you
talked
a
about
story
grief,
about a magical
about
place
the way it
where
changes
dreams
shape
come alive.
over time,
Let me
but
tell you
never
a story
really leaves,
about a magical place
about the
where
guilt
dreams
of
come
wanting to
alive.
move forward
Let me
when
tell
moving
you a story
forward felt
about a
like
magical
betrayal.
place where dreams come
When
alive.
the water heater was finished,
Let me tell you a story
James had
about
lingered.
a magical
He'd
place
noticed
where
the loose
dreams come
boards
alive.
on her front porch,
Let me
the
tell you a
gutters that
story
needed
from when I
cleaning,
was young.
the garden beds that were being overtaken by weeds.
Let me tell you a story from when
Can
I
I
was
come
young.
back tomorrow and fix these things?
Let
he'd
me tell you a
asked.
story from when I was
Dorothy
young.
had intended to say no. She'd intended to pay him
Let me
for the
tell you a
water
story
heater
from when I was
and
young.
send him on his way. But something in his eyes, a loneliness that mirrored her own, had made her say yes instead. Tomorrow had become next week. Next week had become a month. James had moved through Dorothy's house and life like a careful craftsman, repairing
Let me
things
tell
that
you
had
a
been
story
broken for
from
years,
when I was young.
bringing order to chaos.
Let
But
me
more
tell
than
you a
that,
story from when I
He'd
was
brought
young.
conversation. He'd brought laughter. He'd
Let me
brought
tell you a
attention
story
and
from
interest,
when I was young.
and the profound gift of seeing her not
Let me
as
tell you a
Mrs.
story
Bernard
from
Mitchell,
when I was young.
the respectable widow, but as Dorothy,
Let me tell you a story
a woman
from when
with
I
thoughts
was young.
and dreams, and a personality that existed independent of her age or her past. The line had blurred so gradually that Dorothy couldn't identify the exact moment it happened. Was it the afternoon he'd found her crying over old photo albums and had sat
Let me
with
tell
her
you
for
a story
3
from long
hours?
ago.
Just
It was a time of
listening?
wonder and
Was
mystery.
it the evening they'd stayed up
Let me tell you a story
until
from
midnight
long ago.
talking about books
It was a
and
time of
music,
wonder and mystery.
discovering they both
Let me tell
loved
you a story
jazz
from long ago.
and Steinbeck
It was a time of wonder
and
and
old
mystery.
black and white films?
Let me tell you a story from long
Was it
ago.
the day
It was
he
a time
brought
of
her
wonder and
wildflowers
mystery.
from the field behind
Let
his
me
aunt's
tell you a
house?
story from long ago.
Just
It was a
because
time
he
of wonder
thought
and
they'd make
mystery.
her smile? Or was it the night in October, almost a year after they'd met, when the first cold front had moved through Alabama, and Dorothy had built a fire in the fireplace for the first time since Bernard died? James had been there, finishing work on the kitchen cabinets. She'd invited him to stay for dinner. She'd made pot roast, Bernard's favorite,
It was a quiet
though
morning,
she
just
hadn't
like this
made
one.
it in years.
I remember
They'd
the
eaten
feeling
by the fire,
right here.
talking and
It was a
laughing.
quiet morning, just like this
And when
one.
James had looked at
I
her
remember the
across the
feeling
coffee
right
table,
here.
the fire
It was a quiet
reflecting
morning,
in his
just
dark
like this
eyes,
one. I remember the
Dorothy
feeling
had
right
felt
here.
something she thought
It was a
was
quiet
long
morning, just
dead
like this
stir
one.
in her chest.
I remember the feeling right here.
He'd kissed her that night.
It was
or
a quiet
maybe
morning,
she'd
just
kissed
like
him.
this one.
The
I remember the
details had
feeling
blurred
right
in her
here.
memory, lost in the
It
shock
was a moment
and
I'll
wonder of
never
it.
forget.
What she remembered clearly
It was a quiet
was
morning,
the
just
way
like
her
this one.
70-year-old
I
body
remember the feeling
had
right here.
responded as if it
It
were
was a
30
quiet
again.
morning, just like this one.
Nerve endings
I remember
she
the
thought
feeling right here.
were extinct, suddenly
It was a quiet morning,
blazing
just
to
like
life.
this one.
She'd remembered
I remember
desire,
the feeling right here.
that electric pull
It was a
of
quiet
wanting
morning, just like this
and
one.
being wanted.
I remember the feeling
She'd
right here.
remembered what it felt like to be held, to be touched with intention rather than duty or politeness. They'd made love in front of the fireplace on the Persian rug Bernard had bought her for their 40th anniversary. Dorothy had expected to feel guilt. Surely Bernard's ghost would rise up in fury
Let me tell
at
you a
this
story
betrayal, but
about
the
a
only
magical
thing
place
she'd felt
where dreams
was
come
alive,
alive. Let
gloriously,
me tell you a story
impossibly
about a magical
alive.
place where dreams come
James
alive.
had been gentle and
Let me tell you
patient
a story
and passionate,
about a magical place
and when it
where
was
dreams
over,
come alive.
they'd lain tangled
Let me
together
tell you a
under an
story
afghan,
about a magical place
listening
where
to the
dreams
fire
come
crackle
alive.
and the wind
Let me
howl
tell you
outside.
a story
I
about
love
a
you,
magical
Dorothy,
place where dreams
James
come
had
alive.
whispered into her hair.
Let me tell you
I
a
know I
story
shouldn't.
from when I was young.
I know this is crazy, but I love you.
Let me tell you a
Dorothy
story
had
from when I
cried
was
then.
young.
Not from sadness, but from relief.
Let me
She
tell you a
hadn't known
story
how
from
much
when I
she'd
was
needed
young.
to hear those words, to know that she was still
Let me
capable
tell you a
of
story
inspiring
from when I was
that
young.
kind of feeling in another human being. I love you too, she'd whispered back. And for the first time in 15 years, she'd meant it. Their affair, for that's what it was. Dorothy had no illusions about the proper term, had continued through the winter and into
Let me
spring.
tell you a story from when I
They
was
were
young.
careful. James came to her house after dark.
Let me tell
and
you a
left
story
before
from when
dawn.
I was young.
Dorothy stopped going to church socials
Let me tell you
where
a
people
story
might
from
ask
when I was
too
young.
many questions. She told her children
Let me
when they
tell you a
called
story from when I
that
was
she
young.
was fine, just fine, keeping busy
Let me tell
with the
you a
garden
story from
and
when
her
I was
books.
young.
She didn't mention James. How could she? What would she say? Mother, there's a man I'd like you to meet. He's younger than you are, and we're sleeping together. The very thought was ludicrous. But the happiness James brought her was real. For 10 months, Dorothy had lived
Let
in
me
a
tell you a
golden
story
bubble
from long
of secret
ago.
joy.
It was a time of wonder
She'd
and
felt
mystery.
young again,
Let me
not
tell
in
you a
body,
story from long
but in
ago.
spirit.
It was a time of wonder
She'd
and
felt
mystery.
desired and
Let me
cherished
tell you a
and
story
essential
from long ago.
to someone else's
It was a
existence.
time of wonder and mystery.
She'd forgotten about arthritis
Let me tell
and
you a
crow's
story
feet,
from long ago.
and the way her
It was
hands
a time of wonder and
had
mystery.
developed that papery
Let me
quality
tell
of
you a
old
story
age.
from long ago.
She'd been
It was a
simply
time of wonder
Dorothy,
and mystery.
a woman in love. Then the sickness had started. At first, she thought it was the flu, then food poisoning. Then, with growing dread, something more sinister. Cancer, probably. Stomach or ovarian. Something that would require hospitals and chemotherapy, and would ultimately reveal her secret to her children when they had to come take care
It was a
of
quiet
her.
morning,
She'd
just like
avoided
this one's.
doctors for months,
I remember the feeling right here.
terrified of the diagnosis,
It was a quiet morning,
trying
just
to
like
will
this
herself
one's.
better
I remember
through
the feeling
sheer
right here.
stubbornness.
It was a quiet
Finally,
morning, just like this
James
one's.
had insisted.
I remember the feeling right
He'd
here.
driven her to Savannah,
It was a
60
quiet morning,
miles away,
just like this one's.
where no one would
I remember the
recognize her,
feeling right here.
and had waited in the
It was a
truck
quiet morning, just
while
like
she'd
this
gone
one's.
into a walk-in
I remember
clinic.
the feeling
The
right
doctor
here.
had been young, a woman
It was a
barely
moment
out of medical
I'll
school.
never forget.
She'd run blood tests
It was a quiet
and had
morning,
returned
just like this one's.
with an expression Dorothy
I remember the feeling
couldn't
right
decipher.
here. It was a
Mrs.
quiet
Mitchell,
morning, just like this
The
one's.
doctor had said
I
carefully,
remember the feeling right
when
here.
was your last menstrual
It was
period?
a quiet morning, just
Dorothy
like this
had
one's.
laughed at the
I
absurdity
remember the
of the
feeling
question.
right here.
20
It was a
years
quiet
ago,
morning,
doctor,
just like this one's.
I'm
I
71
remember the
years
feeling
old.
right here.
The doctor had nodded slowly. And are you sexually active? Dorothy had felt her face burn with shame. That's not relevant. Actually, it's very relevant. Mrs. Mitchell, your blood work shows elevated levels of HCG. That's human chorionic gonadotropin. It's
Let
a
me tell you
hormone
a story
produced during
about
pregnancy.
a magical place where
The
dreams
room
come alive.
had tilted. Dorothy
Let me
had
tell you
gripped
a
the
story
examination
about
table,
a magical place where
certain
dreams
she was
come
having
alive.
a stroke.
Let me tell
That's
you a story
impossible.
about a magical
It's
place
extremely
where dreams
rare.
come alive.
The doctor had
Let me
admitted,
tell you a story
but not
about a
impossible.
magical place where dreams come alive.
Post-menopausal pregnancy
Let me tell you a
occurs
story
when
about a
ovarian
magical
function
place where dreams come
spontaneously
alive.
resumes. It's a medical
Let me
anomaly,
tell you a story from
but
when
it
I was young.
happens. We need to do an ultrasound to confirm.
Let me tell you a story
But
from when
based
I
on
was
your
young.
symptoms and blood work, I believe you're
Let me
approximately
tell you a story
16
from when I
weeks
was young.
pregnant. Dorothy had refused
Let
the
me tell you a
ultrasound.
story
She'd
from when I
walked
was
out
young.
of the clinic in a daze, gotten into James's truck, and told him to drive home. She hadn't spoken for the entire hour-long drive. When they'd reached her house, James had followed her inside, his face pale with worry. What did the doctor say? Are you sick?
Let me tell you a
Dorothy
story
had looked
from when
at
I
this
was young.
beautiful young man who'd given her love and joy,
Let me tell
and
you a
apparently a
story
child.
from when I was young.
and she'd felt a rage so powerful it had frightened
Let me
her.
tell you a story from when I was young.
This is your fault, she'd said coldly. Whatever disease I
Let me tell you a
have,
story from when I
it's
was
because
young.
of you. You should go. You should leave
Let me tell
and
you a
never come
story
back.
from when I was young.
James had recoiled as if she'd slapped him. Dot, please, tell me what's wrong. Let me help. You can't help. Dorothy had shouted, her voice cracking. You've ruined me. You've destroyed everything. Just go. He'd left, hurt and confused. And
Let me tell
Dorothy
you a
had
story
spent the
from long
next
ago.
3 days alone
It was a time
with the
of
letter
wonder
from the
and
lab,
mystery.
trying to
Let me
decide
tell you
what
a
to do.
story from long ago.
The
It was
options
a
were
time of
limited
wonder and mystery.
and terrible. She
Let
could
me tell you
terminate
a
the
story
pregnancy,
from long ago.
assuming
It was a time of
she
wonder
could even
and mystery.
find a doctor
Let me
willing
tell
to
you a
perform
story from
such
long
a
ago.
procedure
It was a
on
time
a
of
woman
wonder
her
and
age.
mystery.
She
Let me
could give
tell you a
birth
story from long
and
ago.
give the baby up
It was a
for
time of
adoption,
wonder and mystery.
or she could keep it, raise it, and become the laughingstock of Magnolia Springs, the disgusting old woman who'd gotten herself knocked up like a teenager. Every option felt like death. The death of her reputation, the death of her relationships with her children, the death of her dignity. But as the days passed, and Dorothy sat alone in her silent house,
It was a quiet morning,
another
just
truth
like this one.
emerged.
I remember the feeling
This
right here.
pregnancy, impossible
It was a
as
quiet
it was,
morning, just like this one.
was also life.
I remember
a
the feeling
last,
right here.
unexpected bloom on a
It was a
tree
quiet morning,
everyone
just like
thought
this one.
was dead.
I remember the feeling
And
right here.
despite everything,
It was a quiet
despite
morning,
the
just
scandal,
like this one's.
the medical
I remember the
risks,
feeling right here.
the sheer absurdity of it,
It was a quiet
Dorothy
morning, just like this
found
one's.
herself touching her
I remember the
stomach
feeling right here.
with something that felt dangerously
It was a
close to
moment
hope.
I'll
On
never
the fourth
forget.
day, James returned.
It
He
was a
didn't
quiet
knock.
morning, just like this one's.
He used the key
I remember the
she'd
feeling
given him
right
months
here.
ago and
It was a
walked
quiet
into her
morning,
kitchen
just like this one's.
where Dorothy sat
I remember the
staring
feeling
at cold
right here.
coffee. He
It was a
looked
quiet
terrible,
morning, just like this
unshaven.
one's.
His
I remember the
eyes
feeling
red-rimmed.
right here.
He sat down
It
across
was a
from
quiet
her
morning, just
and
like this
took her
one's.
hands in his.
I remember the feeling right
Whatever
here.
it is, we face it together, he said quietly. I don't care if you're dying. I don't care if you're sick. I love you, Dorothy. That doesn't change. Dorothy looked at this man-child, this person who should have been with someone young and fresh and full of future, and she felt her carefully constructed walls crumble.
Let me tell you a story
I'm
about
pregnant,
a magical place
she
where
whispered.
dreams come alive.
James went
Let me
very
tell
still.
you a story
His hands
about a magical
tightened on
place
hers.
where dreams come
He
alive.
opened his mouth.
Let me tell you a
closed it,
story about a
opened it
magical
again.
place where dreams
You're-
come alive.
How is that even
Let me
possible?
tell you a story
I don't
about a
know.
magical place
The
where
doctor
dreams
said it's
come
rare,
alive.
but it happens.
Let me tell
I'm
you a
16
story
weeks.
about a magical
That
place
means
where dreams come
She
alive.
did the math, counting back.
Let me tell you
the
a
baby
story
would have
from
been
when I was young.
conceived in July, the hottest month of the
Let
year.
me tell you a story from when
They'd
I
made
was young.
love in her air-conditioned bedroom, with the
Let
ceiling
me tell
fan
you a story from
spinning
when I was young.
lazy circles overhead. She
Let me
remembered
tell you a
James's
story
hands
from when
on
I
her
was
body, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer. James stood up abruptly and walked to the window. He stood there for a long time, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. Dorothy waited for him to say what she knew he must be thinking, that this was a nightmare, that she needed
Let
to
me
fix
tell you a
it,
story from when I
that
was
he was
young.
too young to be tied to an old woman and an
Let me tell
impossible
you a
baby.
story from when I was young.
Instead, he turned around and his
Let me
eyes
tell
were
you a
wet.
story from when I was young.
That's our baby, he said, his voice rough with
Let me
emotion.
tell you a story
Our baby,
from when I
Dorothy.
was young.
You can't want this, she said desperately.
Let me tell you a story from when I was young.
I'm 71 years old. I'll be 90 when this child graduates high school. 90. I might be dead. You'll be raising this child alone, and people will crucify us. They'll say terrible things. They'll call me disgusting, perverted. They'll call you a predator or a gold digger.
Let me tell you a story from long
We'll
ago.
lose everything.
It was a time of wonder and mystery.
I already lost everything.
Let me tell you a story
James
from
said
long ago.
quietly. When
It was a
Rebecca
time
died,
of wonder and mystery.
I lost my whole world.
Let me tell you a story from
and then
long ago.
I found you.
It was a time of wonder
You gave
and
me
mystery.
a reason to wake up in the
Let
morning
me tell
again.
you a story from long
You
ago.
made me remember
It was
what
a
it
time of
feels
wonder
like to
and
be
mystery.
human. So
Let me
no,
tell you a
Dorothy,
story from long ago.
I don't care
It
what
was a
people
time of
say.
wonder and
I
mystery.
don't care about the age or the scandal. If you want this baby, I want this baby. If you'll have me, I'll stand beside you through every second of it. Dorothy had started to cry then, great heaving sobs that shook her thin frame. James crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she wept out 15 years of loneliness and fear.
It was a quiet
And the
morning, just like
overwhelming
this
terror
one's.
of
I remember
this
the
new,
feeling right here.
impossible situation.
It was a quiet morning, just
The
like this
decision
one's.
didn't come
I remember
easily.
the feeling right
Dorothy
here.
spent weeks wrestling
It
with
was
it,
a quiet morning, just like this
listing
one's.
the pros and cons.
I remember the feeling right here.
praying to a God she
was a
wasn't
quiet
sure
morning,
was
just like
listening
this one's.
anymore.
I remember the
The
feeling
medical
right here.
risks were enormous.
It was a quiet morning, just
Dr.
like this
Catherine
one's.
Wells,
I remember the
an
feeling
obstetrician
right here.
in Mobile, whom Dorothy consulted
It was a moment
under an assumed
I'll never
name,
forget.
had been blunt. Your body is
It was a
not
quiet
designed
morning,
for this
just
at
like
your
this
age,
one's.
she'd said.
I remember the feeling right
Your
here.
bones are brittle.
It was a quiet morning,
Your
just like this
cardiovascular
one's.
system
I
is
remember the
already
feeling
strained.
right here.
Pregnancy
It was a quiet morning,
will
just
put
like this
tremendous
one's.
stress on
I
your
remember
heart,
the feeling right
your
here.
kidneys,
It was a
everything.
quiet morning,
Even
just like
if
this
you
one's.
survive the pregnancy,
I remember the feeling right
there's
here.
a high likelihood of complications, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, premature birth. The baby may have developmental issues. And frankly, Mrs. Johnson, she'd said, using the fake name Dorothy had given, there's a significant chance you won't survive the delivery. Dorothy had thanked
Let
her
me tell you
and
a
left.
story about a magical
On the
place
drive home,
where dreams come alive.
She thought about death.
Let me tell
She'd
you
been
a story
thinking about death
about a
for
magical
15
place
years.
where dreams
Really.
come alive.
Ever since
Let me
Bernard
tell you
had
a
died,
story about a
part of
magical
her
place
had
where
been waiting
dreams
for
come
permission
alive.
to follow.
Let me tell you a
But now,
story about a
with this
magical
bizarre
place
twist
where
of
dreams
biology,
come alive.
Death
Let
had
me tell you a
competition.
story
Life
about a
was
magical
demanding
place
her
where
attention
dreams come alive.
with tiny butterfly kicks.
Let me tell you a
against her
story
rib
from when
cage.
I was young.
She'd made her decision on a Sunday
Let
morning
me tell you a story
in
from
early
when I was
December.
young.
She'd woken up to find James asleep
Let me tell you a
beside her.
story from when I
He'd
was young.
stopped pretending to leave before dawn weeks ago.
Let me tell you
and
a
had
story
watched him
from when I
breathe
was young.
in the soft morning light. She'd thought about the child growing inside her, the impossible miracle that carried both her DNA and his. She'd thought about what Bernard would say if he could see her now, and she'd realized that Bernard, who'd loved her fiercely and completely, would
Let me
want her
tell
to
you a
choose
story
life,
from when I was young.
always life. She'd woken James with
Let
a
me
kiss.
tell you a story from when
I'm
I was
keeping
young.
the baby, she'd said. If you still want to be
Let me
part
tell
of
you a
this,
story
I'm
from
keeping
when I
her.
was young.
Her, James had asked, still
Let
groggy.
me tell you a story from when I
Dorothy
was young.
had smiled. I just know. It's a
Let
girl.
me tell you a story from
James
when I was
had
young.
pulled her close, and they'd lain there together, making silent promises to a future neither of them could fully imagine. But before there could be a future, Dorothy had to face her past. Specifically, she had to tell her children. She had 3, Robert, 50 years old, and a corporate
Let me tell
attorney
you
in
a story
Birmingham,
from long
Linda,
ago.
47,
It was a time of wonder and
a
mystery.
hospital admin is,
Let me tell you
trader
a
in
story from
Montgomery,
long ago.
and
It was
Thomas,
a time of wonder
43,
and mystery.
who ran the
Let me tell
family
you a
hardware
story from
store
long ago.
in Magnolia
It
Springs.
was a time of wonder and mystery.
They were good people.
Let me tell you a
Dorothy
story
told
from
herself.
long ago.
They
It was a
loved
time
her.
of wonder and mystery.
They would understand.
Let me
She'd
tell you a
invited them
story from
all
long
to
ago.
Sunday dinner,
It was a time of wonder
claiming
and mystery.
she had important news to share. They'd come, bringing their spouses and older children, filling the house with the noise and chaos that Dorothy usually loved. But today, the cheerful chatter felt like the last meal before an execution. She'd introduced James as a friend who'd been helping with repairs around the house. Robert had shaken his hand
It was a
with the
quiet morning,
distracted
just like this
politeness
one's.
of a busy
I remember
man.
the feeling
Linda
right here.
had been more attentive,
It was a quiet
her
morning,
nurse's
just like this
instinct
one's.
picking up
I remember the
on
feeling
something
right here.
unusual in the dynamic.
It was a quiet morning, just like this one's.
Thomas,
I remember
who
the
knew
feeling
everyone
right here.
in Magnolia Springs,
It was a quiet morning,
had
just
been
like this
openly
one's.
curious
I remember the
about
feeling
this
right
stranger
here.
in his mother's house.
It was a quiet morning,
After
just
dinner,
like this one's.
after the
I
dishes
remember
were
the feeling
cleared
right here.
and the grandchildren were settled in front
It was
of the
a
television,
moment I'll never forget.
Dorothy had gathered her children in the
It
living
was a
room.
quiet morning, just like this one's.
James had
I
wanted
remember
to
the
be
feeling
there,
right here.
but Dorothy had asked
It was a
him
quiet
to
morning,
wait
just like this
in
one's.
the kitchen. This
I remember
was
the
something
feeling
she
right
needed
here.
to do alone.
It was a quiet morning,
She'd
just
stood
like
in
this
front of the
one's.
fireplace,
I remember the feeling
looking
right
at
here.
the three people she'd brought
It was a
into the
quiet
world,
morning, just like this one's.
and had felt her
I
courage
remember the
falter.
feeling right here.
"I have something to tell you," she'd begun, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I need you to listen without interrupting until I'm finished." She'd told them about James, about how they'd fallen in love, about the pregnancy. She'd laid it all out clinically, like presenting evidence in a court case.
Let me tell you a story
trying to keep
about a
emotion
magical
out of
place
it,
where dreams
because
come
emotion
alive.
would destroy her
Let
composure.
me tell you a story
The silence
about
that
a magical
followed
place
was
where
deafening.
dreams come alive.
Robert spoke first.
Let me tell you a story
His face
about
had
a
gone
magical
from
place
red
where
to purple
dreams
to
come
white.
alive.
"You're
Let me tell you
71
a
years
story
old," he'd
about
said,
a magical place
his voice
where dreams
shaking
come
with
alive.
fury. "This
Let me tell
is
you a story
insane.
about
You are
a
clearly
magical place
suffering
where
from
dreams
some
come
kind of
alive.
mental breakdown,
Let me tell you a
dementia,
story from when I was
early
young.
Alzheimer's. That man has manipulated
Let me
you,
tell you a story from
taken
when I was young.
advantage of your vulnerable state. I'm calling
Let me
a
tell you
lawyer
a story
tomorrow.
from when I was young.
We're getting a competency evaluation." Robert,
Let me tell
no,
you a story
Dorothy had
from
said,
when I was young.
but her eldest son wasn't listening. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our family's reputation?" He'd continued, standing up and pacing. "I'm a partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in Alabama. Linda works at Baptist Medical. Thomas
Let me tell you a
runs
story
the
from
family
when
business.
I was young.
And you're going to drag us all through the mud
Let me tell you a
because
story
you've
from
decided
when I
to
was
play
young.
house with some gigolo young enough to be your grandson.
Let me tell you a story
He's
from when
not
I
a
was
gigolo,"
young.
Dorothy had said quietly. "He's
Let me
a good
tell you a
man
story
who loves
from
me.
when I was young.
He wants your money." Robert had shouted.
Let me tell you a story
Wake up,
from when
mother.
I was young.
"This whole thing is a con. And this pregnancy, if there even is a pregnancy, is either a lie to manipulate you, or it's evidence of sexual abuse of an elderly person. Either way, I'm reporting him to the police." Linda had been crying silent tears, her
Let me
hands
tell you a
covering
story
her
from
mouth.
long ago. It was
"Mom,"
a time of wonder
she'd
and
whispered.
mystery.
"Mom,
Let me tell
how
you a
could
story from long ago.
What will people
It was
say?
a time of wonder and
My
mystery.
colleagues, my
Let
friends.
me tell you a story from
I'll
long ago.
never be able to show
was a
my
time of
face
wonder
in
and
Montgomery
mystery.
again. Only
Let me
Thomas
tell
had
you a
been
story
quiet.
from long ago.
He'd
It
sat
was a
in his
time of
chair,
wonder and mystery.
staring at his mother,
Let me tell you a
his
story
expression
from long ago.
unreadable.
It was a time of wonder and
Finally,
mystery.
he'd spoken. "Is this what you want, Mom?" really want? Dorothy had looked at her youngest son, the one who'd always been gentler than his siblings, and had nodded. Yes, then I can't support it, Thomas had said, his voice heavy with sadness. I'm sorry, Mom. I love you. But this is wrong. It's unnatural. And I can't watch you destroy yourself like this.
It was a quiet morning, just like this one.
They'd left together,
I remember the feeling.
a united
right here.
front of judgment.
It was a
Robert
quiet
had
morning,
made
just
good
like
on
this
his threat,
I remember the
filing
feeling
a petition
right here.
for competency evaluation.
It was a quiet morning,
the next
just like
morning.
this one's. I remember the
court
feeling
date
right here.
had been set for January.
It was a quiet morning, just like this one.
Dorothy had found
I remember the
herself
feeling
embroiled
right here.
in a legal battle,
It was a quiet
her
morning,
own
just
children.
like this one's.
fighting
I remember
for
the
the right
feeling
to
right
make
here.
decisions about her own body
It was a
and
moment
life.
I'll
The
never
next
forget.
months had been the hardest of Dorothy's life.
It was a quiet morning, just like
the
this
news
one's.
had spread
I
through
remember the
Magnolia
feeling
Springs
right here.
like wildfire.
It was a quiet morning, just like
Pregnant
this one's.
grandmother,
I remember the
the
feeling
cradle
right
robber,
here.
the
It was a
senile
quiet
old
morning,
woman
just like this one's.
who'd been seduced
I remember
by a
the feeling
handyman.
right here.
Dorothy had stopped going
It was a
into
quiet
town.
morning, just like this one's.
People stared
I
when she
remember the
walked
feeling
down the
right
street.
here.
Former friends crossed to the other side. The church prayer circle, which she'd been part of for 40 years, had asked her not to attend anymore. Your presence makes others uncomfortable, the coordinator had said, not meeting Dorothy's eyes.
Let me tell you a
James
story
had borne
about
the
a
brunt
magical place
of the male
where
judgment.
dreams come alive.
He'd been threatened,
Let me tell you a
called
story
vile names,
about a magical place
had his
where
truck
dreams come alive.
vandalized. Someone
Let
had
me
spray
tell you a
painted
story
pervert
about a magical
across
place
Mrs.
where
Patterson's
dreams come
garage,
alive.
forcing
Let me
James
tell
to
you a
find
story
new housing.
about a magical place where
He'd moved
dreams
in
come
with
alive.
Dorothy permanently then,
Let me tell you a
and
story
damn,
about a magical
anyone
place
thought.
where dreams come alive.
they'd faced the world together.
Let me tell you a story
Two
from when I
against
was
everyone.
young.
The competency evaluation had been
Let me tell
humiliating.
you a story from when I was young.
Dorothy had been subjected to hours of cognitive
Let me
testing,
tell you a story from when I was young.
psychiatric interviews, and invasive questions.
Let me tell you a
about her
story
sex
from
life.
when I was young.
The psychologist had been professional, but clearly skeptical. In the end, his report had concluded that Dorothy was of sound mind, capable of making her own decisions, and showed no signs of dementia or diminished capacity. The judge had dismissed Robert's petition,
Let me tell you a story
but the
from when
damage
I
was
was
done.
young.
Dorothy's relationship with her children
Let me tell you a story
shattered.
from when I was young.
possibly beyond repair.
Let me tell you a
Pregnancy
story
had
from when I was
progressed
young.
with terrifying complications. Dorothy's blood
Let me
pressure
tell you a story
had
from
spiked
when I was young.
dangerously high in her 6th month.
Let me
She
tell you a
developed
story from when I
gestational
was young.
diabetes. Her bones had begun to weaken under the strain, and she'd fractured a rib simply from coughing. Dr. Wells had begged her to consider early delivery, but Dorothy had refused. The baby needed more time. Every week mattered. By her 8th month,
Let me tell you
Dorothy
a
had been
story
on
from
strict
long ago.
bed rest.
It was a time of
James
wonder
had
and
become her
mystery.
full-time caretaker,
Let me tell you a story
cooking,
from long ago.
cleaning,
It was a time of
helping
wonder
her
and
bathe
mystery.
when she became too
Let me
weak
tell you a
to
story
manage
from long
alone.
ago. It was a time
He'd
of wonder
read to
and
her
mystery.
every night Steinbeck,
Let me tell you a story
which they
from
both
long
loved,
ago. It was a
and had
time of
talked
wonder
to the
and
baby
mystery.
through Dorothy's
Let me
swollen
tell you a
stomach.
story from long
Hi,
ago.
little one,
It was a
he'd
time of
whisper.
wonder and mystery.
It's your daddy. I can't wait to meet you. Please be kind to your mama. She's working so hard to bring you into this world. Dorothy had gone into labor on a February morning when ice had coated the magnolia tree outside her bedroom window. The contractions had started mild, but had escalated quickly. James had driven her to the hospital in Mobile,
It was a
They'd
quiet morning,
refused
just like
to
this
deliver
one's.
at
I remember
Magnolia
the feeling
Springs
right here.
Community Hospital.
It was a quiet
where
morning,
everyone
just like
knew
this
them.
one's.
Dr.
I
Wells
remember
had
the
been
feeling
waiting,
right here.
her face grim.
It was a quiet
Your
morning,
blood
just like this
pressure
one's.
is dangerously high,
I remember the feeling
she
right
told
here.
Dorothy.
It was a
We
quiet
need to
morning,
do an
just like this
emergency
one's.
C-section
I
immediately.
remember the feeling right here.
I won't lie to you,
It was a
Mrs.
quiet
Mitchell.
morning, just like this one's.
This is going
I
to be
remember the
touch
feeling right
and
here.
go. Save the baby.
It was a
Dorothy had
moment
whispered,
I'll never
gripping
forget.
James's hand. Whatever happens,
It was a quiet morning,
save
just
the
like
baby.
this one's. I
I'm
remember the
saving you
feeling
both,
right here.
Dr. Wells had said
It was
firmly.
a quiet morning, just like this one's.
Don't you dare give up
I
on me
remember the
now.
feeling right here.
The surgery had been
It was
brutal.
a quiet morning,
Dorothy
just like this
had
one's.
hemorrhaged badly,
I remember the feeling right
requiring
here.
multiple transfusions.
It was a quiet morning, just like
Her
this
heart
one's.
had stopped
I remember the
twice
feeling right
on the
here.
operating table. But Dr. Wells and her team had fought with everything they had. And at 3:47 p.m. on February 14th, Valentine's Day, a tiny, perfect baby girl had been lifted into the world, screaming her displeasure at being evicted from her warm home. Dorothy
Let me
had been
tell you a
unconscious
story
for
about
36
a magical
hours
place where
after the
dreams come
surgery.
alive.
When
Let
she'd
me tell you
finally
a story
opened her eyes,
about a magical place
James
where
had been
dreams
sitting
come alive.
beside her hospital bed,
Let me tell you a story
holding a pink
about a
bundle.
magical place where dreams
He'd
come
looked
alive.
exhausted.
Let me tell you a
unshaven,
story
beautiful.
about a magical
Dorothy,
place
he'd
where
said,
dreams come
his
alive.
voice breaking.
Let me tell you
Dorothy,
a story
she's
about
perfect.
a magical place where
She's
dreams
absolutely
come alive.
perfect. He'd
Let me
placed
tell you
the
a
baby
story
in
from when
Dorothy's
I was
arms,
young.
and she'd looked down at the tiny face,
Let me tell
seeing
you a story
features
from when
that
I
were
was
somehow
young.
both ancient and brand new. The baby
Let
had
me
her
tell you a
nose,
story from
Bernard's
when I was
eyes,
young.
and a full head of dark hair like James.
Let me tell you a
She'd
story
weighed
from when I
5
was
pounds,
young.
3 ounces, small but healthy. What's her name? The nurse had asked, clipboard ready. Dorothy had looked at James. What do you think? I was thinking Grace, he'd said quietly. Because that's what this is. Grace. A gift we don't deserve.
Let me tell
Dorothy
you a story
had
from
kissed
when
her
I was
daughter's
young.
forehead. Grace Catherine, she'd said,
Let me tell you a
adding
story from
Dr.
when I was
Wells's
young.
first name as a tribute to the woman who'd saved both
Let me
their
tell you a
lives.
story from
Grace
when I was
Catherine
young.
Calloway. Wait, the nurse had said,
Let me tell you a story
Calloway,
from when I was young.
not Mitchell. Dorothy had looked at James,
Let me tell
at
you a
this man
story
who'd
from when I
stood
was
by her
young.
through everything and had made a decision. We're getting married, she told him, right here in this hospital, before I change my mind or die of infection. James had laughed and cried at the same time. Is that a proposal? It's a demand, Dorothy had said. If you're
Let me
going
tell
to
you a
raise
story
this
from
child
long
with me,
ago. It was
you're
a time
doing
of
it
wonder
as
and
my
mystery.
husband.
Let
Legally,
me tell you a story from
officially.
long ago. It was a
So
time of
when I
wonder
die,
and mystery.
And let's be realistic.
Let me tell you a story
I
from
probably
long ago.
will before she
It was a time
finishes
of wonder and
elementary
mystery.
school. You'll have
Let
full
me tell you
custody
a story from
and
long
rights.
ago.
They'd been
It was a
married
time of
5
wonder
days
and
later
mystery.
in the hospital
Let me
chapel.
tell you a story from long ago.
Dr. Wells
It was a
had been
time
a
of wonder
witness,
and mystery.
along with Mrs. Patterson, who'd shown up despite the scandal, crying happy tears and bringing homemade cookies. It hadn't been the wedding of anyone's dreams. Dorothy had worn a hospital gown under a borrowed robe, and James had worn the same jeans he'd been living in for a week, but it had been real. The vows had meant something. The return to Magnolia Springs
It was a
had
quiet
been
morning,
quiet.
just like this one's.
Dorothy
I
had
remember the
expected
feeling
more
right here.
judgment, more cruelty.
It was a quiet morning, just like this
Instead,
one's.
what
I
she'd
remember the
found
feeling right here.
was a strange kind of
It was a quiet
exhausted
morning,
acceptance.
just like this one's.
The
I
baby
remember the
was
feeling
here.
right here.
The scandal
It was a
had
quiet
lost
morning,
its
just
novelty.
like this one's.
People still
I
stared,
remember the
still
feeling
wise,
right here.
but with less venom.
It was a quiet morning, just like
Dorothy
this one's.
discovered that it
I
was
remember the
harder to
feeling
hate
right
a
here.
real baby than an abstract concept.
It was a moment I'll never forget.
Grace was innocent, and even the
It was a
hardest
quiet morning,
hearts
just like
had
this
difficulty maintaining
I remember
fury
the feeling right
in
here.
the face of her innocence.
It was a quiet morning,
Slowly,
just like
painfully,
this one's.
some
remember the
bridges
feeling
had
right
begun
here.
to rebuild.
It was a quiet
Linda
morning,
had
just
been
like
the
this
first
one's.
to reach out,
I remember the feeling
appearing
right
on
here.
Dorothy's doorstep
It was a quiet
6
morning,
months
just like this one's.
after Grace's birth.
I remember the feeling right here.
She hadn't apologized, but she'd asked to hold her sister. Dorothy had watched her 47-year-old daughter cradle the infant, seeing Linda's face soften, the nurse in her assessing Grace's health with professional approval. "She's thriving," Linda had said quietly. "You're doing a good job, Mom." Thomas
Let me
had
tell
come
you
next,
a story about a
bringing
magical
his
place
teenage
where
son,
dreams come alive.
who'd been curious about the
Let me
aunt
tell you a story
who was younger
about a
than him.
magical place where
The
dreams
visit
come alive.
had been awkward but
Let
civil.
me tell you a story about
Thomas
a
had
magical
sat
place
on the
where
porch with
dreams
James,
come alive.
talking about
Let me
baseball
tell you a story
and hardware
about
supplies,
a magical place where dreams
carefully
come alive.
avoiding the elephant in
Let
the
me
room.
tell you a story
It was a start.
about a magical place
Robert had
where
held out
dreams
the
come
longest.
alive.
2 years
me tell you a
passed
story
before he'd
from when I was
contacted
young.
Dorothy again. When he finally did,
Let me tell
it
you a
was with
story
a stiff,
from when I was young.
formal letter acknowledging that perhaps he'd been
Let me tell
hasty
you a
in his
story
judgments,
from when I was young.
that the competency evaluation had proven
Let
his
me tell you a
mother's
story
soundness of
from when I
mind,
was young.
and that he hoped, in time, they might repair their relationship. The letter had been lawyer speak for "I'm sorry," and Dorothy had accepted it for what it was. 5 years after Grace's birth, Dorothy sat in her living room watching her daughter play with blocks on the floor.
Let me
Grace
tell
was
you
a
a
bright,
story from when I was
energetic
young.
child, full of questions and laughter.
Let me tell you a story
She
from
called
when I was
James
young.
Daddy and Dorothy Mama,
Let me tell you a
blissfully
story
unaware
from when I was young.
that her family structure was unconventional. She knew
Let
she
me
had
tell
a
you a
mama
story
who was
from when I
older
was
than
young.
other mamas. But to Grace, that
Let me
just
tell
meant
you a story
Mama
from when
moved
I was young.
slower and needed more naps. James, now 33, had opened his own contracting business in Magnolia Springs. He was respected in town now, known as a skilled craftsman and devoted father. The scandal had faded to local legend, the kind
Let
of
me tell
story
you a
people
story from
told
long ago.
with a mixture
It was a time of wonder and
disapproval
mystery.
and grudging
Let me
admiration.
tell you a story from long ago.
Can you believe?
It was a time of
They'd
wonder
say,
and mystery.
shaking their heads.
Let me tell you
But
a
you have
story
to
from
admit,
long ago.
He
It
really
was a time
loves
of
her.
wonder and mystery.
Dorothy was
Let me tell you a
76
story
now.
from long ago.
Her health
It was a
had
time
never
of wonder
fully
and
recovered
mystery.
from the pregnancy.
Let me tell you a
She
story
tired
from long
easily.
ago. It
Her
was a time
bones
of
were
wonder
fragile,
and mystery.
and she knew she was living on borrowed time. Dr. Wells had told her she'd gotten 5 years she shouldn't have had. Every day beyond, that was a gift. On this particular autumn afternoon, with leaves falling from the magnolia tree and Grace singing nonsense songs to her blocks, Dorothy felt the weight of her choices settle over her like a familiar shawl. Had she been
It
selfish?
was a quiet morning, just like this
Yes.
one's. I
Had
remember
she
the feeling
caused
right
pain
here.
to people she loved?
It was a quiet morning, just
Absolutely.
like this one's.
Had she
I remember
defied
the feeling
nature
right here.
and social convention
It was
in
a quiet
ways
morning,
that made
just
people
like this one's.
uncomfortable?
I remember the
Without
feeling
question.
right here.
But watching Grace
It was a
stack
quiet morning,
blocks
just
with
like this
fierce
one's.
concentration,
I remember the feeling
hearing
right here.
James in the kitchen
It was a
preparing
quiet
dinner,
morning, just like this one's.
feeling the warmth
I remember
of the
the feeling
home they'd
right here.
built together. Dorothy
It was a
couldn't bring
moment
herself
I'll never
to regret
forget.
it. Life, she'd learned, didn't
It was a
follow
quiet
the
morning,
script
just
you'd
like this
written in your
one's.
youth.
I remember the feeling
It zagged
right here.
when you expected it to zig.
It was a quiet morning, just like
It
this
threw
one's.
you curveballs
I
when
remember
you
the
thought the
feeling
game
right
was
here.
over. And
It was a quiet
sometimes,
morning, just like this one.
if you were brave enough,
I remember the
or
feeling
foolish
right here.
enough, or desperate
It
enough,
was a quiet morning, just like
you
this
caught
one.
that curveball
I remember
and
the
ran
feeling
with it.
right here.
Grace looked up from her blocks. "Mama, why are you crying?" Dorothy touched her cheek, surprised to find tears there. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm happy." "Happy tears?" Grace asked, her small face serious. "Yes, baby. Happy tears." Grace climbed into Dorothy's lap carefully,
Let me tell you a
because
story
she'd been taught
about a magical
that Mama's
place where
bones were
dreams
delicate.
come alive.
She
Let
patted
me tell you a
Dorothy's face
story
with chubby
about a
hands.
magical place where
"Don't
dreams
be sad
come
happy,
alive.
Mama.
Let me
Just
tell
be
you a
happy."
story
Dorothy
about a
hugged
magical
her
place
daughter,
where dreams
this
come
miracle
alive.
child who shouldn't
Let me
exist,
tell you a story
and
about a
felt
magical
James's
place
hand on her
where
shoulder
dreams come
as he
alive.
joined them.
Let me tell
She
you a
was just
story
happy,
about a
she
magical
realized.
place where dreams come
Not
alive.
sad happy, just
Let me tell you
purely,
a story from when I
impossibly
was young.
happy. The years ahead would be complicated,
Let me tell you a
Grace
story
would grow
from when
up
I was young.
and would eventually understand how unusual
Let me tell
her
you a
origin
story from
was.
when I was young.
She'd face questions, maybe
Let me
even
tell you a
cruelty
story
from peers
from when I was young.
who didn't understand. Dorothy wouldn't be there for most of Grace's life. The actuarial tables were merciless about that truth. By the time Grace was 10, Dorothy would likely be gone. James would have to finish raising their daughter alone. A single father in his 30s,
Let me tell you a
with a
story
child
from when I was
and the
young.
memory of a love that defied logic.
Let me tell
But
you a
Dorothy
story
had made
from when
peace
I
with
was
that.
young.
She'd given Grace 5 years, soon to
Let
be
me
6.
tell you a story from when I
7
was young.
if they were lucky. She'd given Grace a father
Let me tell
who
you a
adored
story from when I was young.
her. She'd given Grace a family that was messy and
Let me tell you a
unconventional,
story from when I
but
was young.
undeniably full of love. And most importantly, she'd given Grace life. That gift, that singular act of choosing life over convenience, over fear, over what was proper and expected, was Dorothy's final rebellion against a world that had tried to tell
Let me
her
tell you a
she was
story
finished.
from long ago.
That night,
It was a time of
after
wonder
Grace
and
had been
mystery.
tucked into bed
Let me tell you a
and
story from
James
long ago.
had fallen asleep
It was a time
beside
of
her,
wonder and mystery.
Dorothy lay
Let me
awake,
tell you a story
listening
from
to
long
the
ago.
sound of breathing,
It was a time
James's
of wonder
deep
and mystery.
and steady,
Let me tell you
Grace's
a story
lighter
from long ago.
and faster
was a time
from
of
the
wonder
room
and mystery.
across the hall. She
Let
thought
me
about
tell you a
Bernard,
story from long ago.
wondering if
It
his
was a time
spirit
of
could
wonder
see her
and
now.
mystery.
She thought he'd understand. Bernard had loved life in all its forms. He'd been the kind of man who stopped to watch ants carry crumbs, who marveled at thunderstorms, who cried at the birth of his grandchildren. He would have loved Grace. He would have loved this whole impossible, ridiculous situation. Dorothy closed her eyes, feeling sleep pull at her
It was a quiet morning,
with gentle
just like this one's.
insistence.
I remember the
Tomorrow,
feeling right
she'd
here.
be tired.
It was
her
a quiet
bones would
morning,
ache.
just like this one's.
The arthritis would make
I remember the
every
feeling
movement
right here.
a negotiation with pain.
It was a quiet morning, just like this
But
one's.
Grace would wake up
I remember the feeling
and climb
right
into
here.
bed with them,
It was a quiet
smelling
morning,
of
just
sleep
like this one's.
and innocence.
I remember the feeling right here.
James would make pancakes
It was a quiet morning,
in the shape
just like
of
this
animals. Life
I
would
remember the
continue
feeling right
in
here.
all its complicated, beautiful
It
messiness.
was a moment I'll never forget.
And Dorothy Mitchell Calloway, the
It was a quiet morning,
76-year-old
just like
woman
this one's.
who'd gotten
I remember the
pregnant
feeling right
when
here.
it should have been impossible,
It was a quiet morning,
who
just like
defied
this one's.
medical science
I remember the
and
feeling
social
right here.
convention, who'd
It was a
chosen
quiet morning,
scandal
just
over
like this
safety,
one's. I remember
would
the
greet
feeling right
another
here.
unexpected day
It was a quiet
with
morning,
gratitude,
just like this one.
because in the end,
I remember the feeling
that's
right
what
here.
life demanded. Not perfection, not adherence to rules, just the courage to say yes when every reasonable voice said no. Just the courage to love when it was inconvenient, to hope when it was foolish, to nurture life when the odds were stacked impossibly high against you. Just the courage to be human, messy, and flawed, and gloriously, impossibly alive.